out there, my name is Milesy and welcome to my channel. Today I want to look at one of these mega art sets that is super overexposed, but that's fine. And I want to talk about why they don't make as good of gifts as a lot of people seem to think they do. And I'm sure that this is not a unique experience to just me, but I got tons of these as a kid because I was really into art from a young age and everyone in my family knew that. And this seems on the surface like a really good deal. This is 120 pieces. It has pencils, crayons, oil pastels, markers, paints, and then some other little doodads, which are all pretty standard. And the thing is that you're getting all of this for under $20. So that seems like it's a really good deal. And it's a really good deal for your wallet, but the problem is that kids can tell when art supplies are bad. They can tell when they're cheap and not very nice. And when art supplies are bad, it kind of gives this really weird impression of, I can't do this, and it actually quashes creativity rather than fostering it. So I have some predictions about this thing. I've not opened it up yet. I just took off the wrapper. The markers are going to be water-based. They're going to be very dry. They're going to chew up the paper and you won't be able to blend with them. The crayons are going to be very waxy. They're not going to have a lot of pigment to them. They're going to be very transparent. They're going to just be really chunky and gross. The paints are going to be very chalky. They're not, again, going to have the best coverage. And they're probably going to pool on the page really awkwardly. The pencils are probably going to be on par with golf pencils, meaning that the lead or whatever is in there, it's not lead, it's not graphite, it's probably wax, is going to be very hard, kind of brittle, and probably won't blend very well, probably won't sharpen very well. The oil pastels have about a 50-50 chance of being decent because those are one of the ones that are harder to screw up. And anytime I got one of these sets, the oil pastels were always the only thing worth using. So they're either, I think, going to be really nice and blendable. They're going to make a huge mess. Oil pastels always do. Or they're going to be just like the crayons, kind of waxy, not very loaded with pigment. And I'm going to be testing this on 3 different types of paper. I have some printer paper, I have some cardstock, and I have some watercolor paper. And I feel like the printer paper and the cardstock are what you are probably most likely going to be giving to your child. The watercolor paper is just to see how this is on good paper. So let's open it up and take a look. And not spill my drink. And when we open this thing up here, we can see these really cheap little itty-bitty markers. Let's pull one out and look at it. And the nib, it's hard to see on the camera, is looks kind of dry. Looks kind of dry. The pencils here are, they are really small. They're not labeled. So, I mean, you don't really need them to be labeled, but kids like labels. They do feel really hard. Just kind of at a first glance, we've got this really weird little ruler that I cannot get out, which, you know, it's a ruler. It's hard to screw up a ruler. It's got inch, it's got centimeters, it's 6 inches long. We have glue. I never understood the purpose of the glue, just that it always makes a mess, but they always seem to come with one. And then on this side over here, we'll twist it this way, I guess, we have the crayons, which don't look very nice. It's got some smudges on it from other colors. We've got the pastels, which, yeah, these feel really waxy. These don't really seem like they might be very good, but we'll see. And then we've got the watercolor pan, which comes with a palette. And a bunch of that came off on my finger. And then we've got a drawing pencil, which isn't sharpened. We've got one of the lamest brushes in the world. I don't know why they give these brushes to anybody. They're crap. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know at all. Maybe that's for cleaning your brush or for blending. We've got an eraser, which might be decent. It might just smear everything around. I don't know. We'll see. We've got our little pencil sharpener. These usually suck. The scissors, which are they're plastic. They're entirely plastic. Those are gonna suck. And we have got a paper clip. I don't know why we have a paper clip. Anyway, so let's go ahead. There goes that. I'm gonna grab some paper, and we're going to start testing these each individually. Okay, so I've grabbed a few different types of paper. I have some basic printer paper, which is probably, I think, what most kids are likely to be using on something like this. Let's turn this light on now. Oh, that's better. So I think most kids are going to be likely to be using printer paper because that's what most people have. So we're going to test it on printer paper. And then I've grabbed some cardstock. I believe this is 120 pound. I can't remember, and it's not written on the page. It's either 90 or 120. But we've got some of that, which might also be fairly standard around most houses. And then I have some cold press watercolor paper that I'm going to be testing everything out on as well. And this is just to see what the different materials behave like on each of them. So let's put these aside, and we will use some of the paper here first. And I think I'm going to put down a second one underneath just to see how much it bleeds. So first, let's take a look at the markers. The pencil fell out of its home. That's another thing I always remember, is that nothing stays where you put it. So let's take a look at some red, some black, some pink, and some blue, just to see kind of a decent little... Yeah, let's grab some yellow too. Grab a few colors, see how they go. Now these are going to be water-based, and I know that because they always are. When you want to learn how to actually use markers, what you want are alcohol-based. And the reason why is because water-based markers don't blend as well. They just immediately dry, and they don't reactivate once they have dried. Alcohol-based markers, when you put down another layer, will reactivate and you can blend them. You can't do that with water markers. So the cap fits in there, which is nice. And it's very streaky. It's already chewed up the page. It has remarkably chewed up the page. It hasn't bled through. Now let me turn down my exposure a little bit. And it's kind of hard to see. If I adjust my focus over here, you might be able to see this. So it's really streaky, and you can see that it's really chewed up the page, which is exactly what I knew it would do, honestly. So we've got that down, and yeah, you can see it's picked up some of the page right from the right from it, so it's chewed that up really badly. So if we want to do some yellow, and then maybe let's blend it with some pink. We do get red, but we've also just chewed right through the page, and you can see that it's actually creating little holes in the page. So these markers, they are not very good on printer paper. So let's grab ourselves some cardstock. And again, I believe this is 190 pound. And we'll try the same thing with the cardstock. Stay put, please. And it's really chunking up. You can see just it's pulling the top layer of paper off. You don't want it to do that. That's just going to create a mess. It's going to frustrate the kid. And if I wanted to kind of try to come in here and blend them together, it just creates a mess. You can't really blend with those very well. And now, because it's a water-based marker, I've ruined the yellow one. And you have to really work to get that pink off of there. And then we have to get the paper off of there. So, water-based markers, they seem like they're going to be a good deal. They're almost always not. Because they're not going to behave very well on the type of paper that you're likely to have around the house. Let's see how well it works with the watercolor paper. My little markers just want to go everywhere. Oops. So the watercolor paper, stay. If we go over here, you'll notice that the colors seem a lot less saturated now. So there's the red. There's the pink. They're a lot less bright compared to that pink. Like, it's almost a different color entirely. And that is because it's not able to soak into the watercolor paper as much, because you don't want it to do that. It did still kind of chew up the page, though. And let's see, how does the black... Oh, the black is not even black. The black is really transparent, so... A kid might not notice that, but I definitely do. So the markers, they're just going to cause a mess. You can see they're all over my hands already just from working with these things for less than 5 minutes. They create an enormous mess. That's a no on these markers. You don't want these markers in your house. More often than not, they're not even really washable despite being water-based. They're really, really terrible. So let's go ahead and try the pencils next. Okay, so we're going to grab a couple of pencils. Let's grab a yellow one, a red one. Let's grab a brown one. And try not to fling my stuff everywhere. And we'll go back to the printer paper first. Now, these aren't going to bleed through the page, unlike the markers will. I knew the markers would because that's just how water-based markers do. So we've got 3 colors of pencil here, and yeah, they're fairly hard. If I were to press really hard here, that is all the darker that is. And this shows as a bright red. So that's going to probably be disappointing to a child. They're not going to be able to get the colors that they want. So if we do this, and then we try to blend it, they might be blending. They're both so pale. Again, here we go. That is the darkest I can get it. You can see all of this dust that comes off from doing that, though, which a kid is going to be wanting to get that dark brown. They picked that color because that's what they wanted. And it's hard to tell. I don't think they're blending at all. They're very... It's like a really hard wax. It's not what you would really want from a pencil, which is usually what pencils are. They're just a different type of crayon, which is why in some countries they're called pencil crayons. But they don't seem to want to blend very much. Let's grab a blue and see if we can convince the red and the blue to make us some purple. So there's our red. So they don't so much blend as they just layer on top of each other. That's not really purple. It's more like the blue erased the red, and then the red erases the blue. They're not blending at all. So you're not going to learn color theory. You're not going to learn how to blend pencils with pencils that can't blend. And blending is one of the most important skills to have when you're learning how to use colored pencils. So maybe they're going to be a little bit better behaved on the cardstock. Let's see. I doubt it. They're no much darker. And are they blending on the cardstock? No. The blue just kind of erases the red, which is really bizarre. I've never seen pencils behave that way. Maybe this is how these these quote-unquote art case pencils have always behaved. I don't remember. Can we get purple on the watercolor paper? Let's see. Not really. That's very, very washed out. It's so washed out, you guys can't even see it. Let me turn that down for you. So, no, they just erase one another. That's going to be disappointing. It's going to just make the kid that you give these to think that pencils are this extremely advanced form of art that they're never going to figure out. It's just going to be discouraging and disappointing. Your child is not going to learn from this. This is going to be very off-putting. So I think we're done with the pencils. Let's try some crayons. Let's grab some red. Let's grab some blue. Let's grab a pink. And I expect these to be kind of the same, just really waxy and not very opaque. But let's see. So on our printer paper, how are you? Okay, so they are opaque, but they're also incredibly soft. I've already worn it down that much. So the thing is, these have already done the opposite of what you want them to. You want your colored pencils to be a little softer, and you want your wax crayons to be a little harder. Also, that's a lot lighter than what it looks like it should be, so I've grabbed a red one and got pink. How... They do blend. So they do blend. That is remarkably better blending than the pencils were. You can see down here for comparison the pencil that didn't blend, and then we did get ourselves a really nice rich purple there. So let's see. Yeah. That said, these are really soft. They're just kind of... You don't get a lot of control with them, I think. Even going very, very lightly. I can get some light colors. I can kind of do some more wispy blending. But your 6-year-old who's getting into art isn't going to have this kind of control. I wasn't even pressing that hard. That was just with very moderate pressure. Those are really soft. That said, they're behaving better than the pencils, which surprises me, but I'd still go for Crayola over these. You can get a 12-pack of Crayola that has very color theory friendly colors that can teach them how to layer, how to blend, how to get their own colors. Let's see how this is on the cardstock. If it's any different, probably isn't going to be. It's brighter on the cardstock, but I think that's just because the cardstock's a brighter white. It does surprise me how much more easily they blend, though. But yeah, they are very soft, so you're going to get a lot of these little waxy things popping out, but they aren't awful. But I wouldn't say that it's worth getting this entire kit when you can get a 12-pack of Crayola for half this kit, if not less, and just go to town there. And then let's see on the watercolor paper. Which, because they're so thick and chunky, you do get this really nice texture with the watercolor paper, although, I mean, they're still going to be behaving the same way. So far, though, these are the ones that blend the best, which is surprising, but I wouldn't say that the kit is worth it just for some crayons when there are some better ones out there for less money. So let's go ahead and try some oil pastels and see how these are. So let's grab some red. Let's grab some blue. Give it to me. Let's grab some yellow. And these are the ones that, these are either going to be pretty decent or they're going to be terrible. So let's see. Either way, they're going to be messy. Oil pastels always are. So I never know why they come in kits designed for children. However, they don't feel right. I can tell you that right off the bat. They don't really feel right. But let's see. So how they're supposed to work is, yeah, these are just crayons. These are just really dull crayons. Actually, ironically, these are more in line with what you want from a decent crayon. But these are not oil pastels. These are lying. These are absolutely wax. And I think you can tell by looking at that it was cut wax. It's not oil. So they're not going to blend the way you want oil pastels to go, and they don't seem to want to blend at all, which goes counter to how oil pastels should be working. So hilariously, so far the crayons have been the best ones. But no, these aren't even oil pastels. Oil pastels are, by definition, oil-based. These are very obviously wax. And they're supposed to be messy, which is why I never understand why they come in these kits. And a lot of times they are somewhat decent. It's hard to screw up an oil pastel. Nemu managed to do it. So these are really unfortunate. Let's take a look on the cardstock. I mean, they're not going to be much better. Because how oil pastels are supposed to work is you put down a layer and you kind of like smear it around on the page. We aren't able to do that. We're just almost getting kind of an orange there, but they don't blend. The crayons didn't blend either, but I wasn't expecting crayons to blend their crayons. These are just different crayons. These are wax crayons. These are a harder wax crayon in a different shape. Unfortunately, they are not even oil pastels. And then here we go on the watercolor paper, just for good measure. Yeah, so there is our red and blue with the crayon. There's our red and blue with the oil pastels. These are garbage. So now that we've got those, let's try to do a little bit of watercolor. So this is the brush that it comes with, and it's got like a couple dozen really hard bristles. And I'll show you what these are like, and then I'll show you what a watercolor brush is supposed to be. I have some water right over here. Okay, so we're going to just grab up some of the red, and it's just going to create some really scratchy lines. And then let's grab up some blue. Let's do this blue. And it'll create some scratchy lines that way. Now, this is a terrible brush. It feels terrible in your hand. Even as a kid, I knew these were garbage. So, where do you go? Who cares? In the trash. You're terrible. This is a watercolor brush. And this has some natural fibers. I forget what it is. Camel, possibly. And we're just going to grab a little bit of water. And the natural fibers will hold onto the water so that you can actually get more on your paint. So, there we go. We've actually like got some watercolors and not just some goop on a brush. So, we do get some pigment there. And then we'll grab up some of that blue. A little bit more, please. Okay, so they're not blending very well on the page. It seems like once they're on the page, that's where they live. Where did I put the palette? I literally just had it in my hand. Where did I put it? There it is. So how you're supposed to do this, which it doesn't come with any instructions, so your 6-year-old is going to have some trouble here, is we're going to grab a bunch of water. And then we're going to grab a little bit of paint. And then we're going to grab a little bit of blue. And that's how you blend it. So sometimes you can blend the paints on the page. These ones, not so much. And then I'm going to clean off the blue a little bit. I mean, I'm not too fussed about it. So I'm actually kind of impressed with the opacity. But these are not going to be great watercolors because you can't blend them on the page. So opacity doesn't really matter if you can't get funky colors with them. And I want to just see something here. If I go like bloop. It's trying to, but it's not really. So that is what it's like on the printer paper. On the cardstock, let's see. I'll just slot you in under there. It's pretty much the same, and if I quickly grab up some blue, can I blend you on the page? Almost, so it didn't really want to blend on the page with the printer paper. I know it's kind of hard to see, but this is all the space that I have. So on the printer paper, it didn't really want to blend. It's blending a little bit better on the cardstock. Let's take a look on the watercolor paper. So there we have that, and then we're going to grab a little bit of the blue and kind of come over here. So if you want to give your kid some more expensive paper, it'll look really nice. More likely, they're going to be playing with a coloring book or grabbing paper out of the printer. They're not, unless you want to, you know, get them some better paper, these aren't going to work. And if you're going to get them better paper, why not get them better paints? Why not get them better markers that will work with them? Why not get them better pencils, better crayons? So I am not actually going to leave a link to this down in the description like I normally do. Instead, I'm going to put a link down to an affiliate store where you can take a look at a lot of entry-level materials. I've got marker packs, I've got pencils, I've got paint. I haven't added any crayons or pastels yet, but if I find some that I like by the time this video goes out, that will be in there as well. And that's going to be a list that stays up indefinitely as I get more products. But these are absolutely terrible. I do not recommend them. Let's see how awful. That's not what I want. These scissors are, shall we? These cheap little plastic scissors. So surprisingly, they do cut. They feel awful. And I don't think you're going to get anything thicker than that cut. Ugh, no, I just broke them in half. So try to cut cardstock with cardstock, which I think is what you're most likely to be cutting with them, and you will break them in half. I heard a piece fly across the room. So those are trash. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend. Let's look at the pencil real quick. I can't even get this out. If you're giving this to a kid, they've got to have Hulk hands. Give it to me. Oh, I had it for like half a second. There we go. So we've got I'd have lost attention by now. I'd be doing something else if I were 6. My attention span has gone out the window. So it's a really hard pencil, which is not in and of itself a bad thing. There are varying degrees of hardness with pencils. This is definitely an H. It's not a B. Possibly an HB, but it's fairly hard. Let's wrestle this eraser out and see if we can open it. Will you erase or will you smear and smudge? Surprisingly, it erases. Then again, it is one of those, what do you call them? I forget what they're called. Not nylon, but they're kind of like this really weird synthetic plasticky eraser. It's decent. Probably not the best for this pencil that it comes with, though. But I think for $20, you can get your kid a set of really nice alcohol markers and some really nice watercolor paints for the same amount of money, and they can actually learn something rather than spending $20 on markers that are just going to make a mess, pencils that don't blend, 2 different types of crayons because it lied to you. So yeah, I'm going to put that link down in the description. Go ahead and check it out. There's a lot of stuff. I've got markers, paints, pencils, a bunch of stuff that I have personally used and enjoyed because I like cheap supplies. There's a difference, though, between affordable cheap and just poorly produced cheap. And these art sets are always going to be poorly produced cheap. They're not a good value for money. They just don't work very well. The markers are going to dry out immediately. The pencils aren't fun to use. The only really decent thing were the crayons and the watercolors. The oil pastels, I'm really surprised at how badly they screwed those up. I broke the scissors in half trying to cut a piece of cardstock, so just give your kids some craft safety scissors, man, or whatever they are. Is that craft? No, Crayola. That's what I'm thinking of. Give them some Crayola safety scissors, and they'll be happier. But stay away from these. Kids don't like them. And as your kid gets older and you keep giving them these supplies, it just becomes insulting. I think I got one of these kits every year through high school because nobody really understood that they're garbage. I didn't start to learn how to use markers and pencils until I was well into my 20s because I didn't know what to look for in good brands. This was all I was exposed to my entire adolescence. I didn't know that markers weren't impossible to use because they had this intense learning curve. Markers were impossible to use because I kept getting literal garbage. So don't do it. Just don't do these. If you're giving it to a 4-year-old to keep them entertained, it'll keep a 4-year-old entertained. But if you're giving this to someone who's actually trying to learn how to do art, all you're going to do is discourage them and make it harder for them to get into what they're doing. So check out the affiliate store down below. It's through Amazon, and every time you use that store, it helps me out a little bit. So that link is down in the description. You will not find this. I cannot recommend these to anyone. I got this specifically to show how poorly built they are and just how poor quality they are. The markers are terrible, the pencils are terrible, the pastels are terrible. Everything's just kind of terrible. There are better crayons out there for cheaper. There are better paints out there for cheaper, so don't even bother. But I am going to get this thing out of my room as soon as possible because it's terrible. I might steal that eraser. It seems decent. Nothing else in here is really worth keeping, though, so that's where we are. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!